The city buzzed with a rhythm Peter Parker had memorized by heart. Sirens, horns, a shout from across the street. But tonight, something was off. The pulse of New York had skipped a beat. Peter stood atop a rooftop near Queens. He should have felt the night wind on his face, but the air was unnaturally still, like the city was holding its breath. Below, the streets glimmered under flickering lights, but no sounds of life echoed. No dogs barking, no couples arguing, just silence. Thick, humming silence. Then came the whisper. At first, it was a sound so faint it could have been his imagination, but it returned, just behind his ear, soft, chilling. "Peter!" He turned quickly, suit tightening, eyes narrowing. Nothing. Not even wind. He had faced gods, clones, alien symbiotes, but this was different. His spider sense didn't scream, it pulsed. Like a heartbeat, uneasy, sick. And as he looked across the dark skyline, he knew something ancient had awakened. Peter tried to return home. He swung across the night sky, over rooftops and alleys, pretending things were normal. Pretending he wasn't shaken, but his hands trembled slightly when he shot his web. Inside his apartment, everything looked the same. The torn curtain, the half-eaten Chinese takeout, the faded photo of Aunt May beside the fridge. But nothing felt the same. Even the shadows on the wall seemed unfamiliar, warped. That night he couldn't sleep. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw threads, endless, intertwining threads. Each one pulsated with life, some bright, some dark, and some twitching, as if aware of his gaze. In the center, a presence waited, its eyes like voids, its voice stitched from nightmares. You swing above destinies, but deny the loom beneath. Peter woke up gasping. Sweat clung to him like another skin. He stumbled to the bathroom, stared into the mirror. His reflection stared back, but for a second it smiled at him. And it wasn't his smile. His phone vibrated, a message from MJ. "Peter, did you dream it too?" He didn't reply, because in the reflection, the threads were behind him now. The address came through an anonymous email. No subject line, no sender, just a single sentence. It started where the web frayed. Attached was a photo, grainy monochrome, of a crumbling building in the Lower East Side. Peter didn't hesitate. He arrived before sunrise, his suit darkened to avoid detection. The building stood alone among newer apartments like a rotten tooth in a perfect smile. Windows shattered, vines twisted around rusted scaffolding. The closer he stepped, the colder the air became. He entered through a cracked doorway. Inside, silence, but not the peaceful kind, the kind that listens. Dust carpeted the floor, and old machinery lay dormant like sleeping beasts. Spider sense flared, then vanished. At the center of the lobby, a massive loom, ancient, its frame made of dark wood and bone-like metal. Threads stretched out from it, into nothingness, vibrating gently in the still air. He touched one, instantly. Images. MJ's face, crying, a burning Daily Bugle. A masked figure, not him, swinging through fire. A voice whispered, sharp as thread through flesh, "We do not weave what we want. We weave what must be." Peter stumbled back, the loom trembled, and something stirred behind the threads. Peter staggered away from the loom, heart pounding. The thread still vibrated as if remembering his touch. He'd seen visions before, hallucinations, illusions, tricks from villains. But this was different. It felt real. His instincts screamed, "Leave," but his mind whispered, "Stay." A whisper rose from the shadows, not behind him, all around him. It wasn't a voice, it was many, speaking in unison. Ancient, genderless, as if the building itself had learned to speak. You walk the thread, but do not see the pattern. Peter's fists clenched. "Who are you?" The walls pulsed. A guardian of consequence, a servant of alignment, a weaver. Then, silence. And something stepped out, not walked, stepped out. From the loom itself, it was tall, wrapped in robes that seemed made of shifting thread. Its face was hidden behind a mask. No eyes, no mouth, just white porcelain etched with symbols. Around its shoulders, threads floated, connecting to nowhere. Or everywhere. Peter raised his guard. "If you're behind the attacks," the weaver raised a hand. "No, We do not harm, we correct. Correct what? Deviation. From the great pattern. Peter took a step back. I've seen what you call correction. Cities in flames, people screaming. You call that balance? The weaver tilted its head. When a string is pulled wrong, all others must be pulled tighter. Peter felt something tighten in his chest. His memories flickered. Uncle Ben's death, Gwen's fall, Harry's rage, Aunt May's pain. All moments, perfectly aligned. He whispered, "You've been watching me." The weaver replied gently, "We've been weaving you." Peter sat in his dark apartment staring at the wall. The memory of the weaver's voice echoed in his head like an itch he couldn't scratch. "We've been weaving you." Was it metaphor or truth? He opened his laptop and typed furiously, "Multiversal pattern theory, Loom nexus, thread lines of fate." The screen flooded with obscure research, strange forums, symbols that matched what he saw on the loom. One name kept appearing in whispers. Milo Trask, a physicist, genius level, missing for 10 years and known as the pattern breaker. Peter tracked an old paper Trask had written in the early 2000s, one about anomalies in reality behaving like cut threads. Trask claimed fate was real and that some people could slip outside it, but it always tried to pull them back, always. Peter followed the trail, abandoned labs, old voice recordings, handwritten notes, until he found a location buried in metadata. Lark Point Asylum, closed after a fire. He went. The building was charred, half collapsed, and deep in the rubble, Peter found a room untouched by flame. The walls were covered in thread diagrams, like spider webs intersecting fates. And in the center, written in red, "They fixed the pattern. I tried to break it." Peter turned and saw the camera, still running, still recording, and the timestamp was today's date. Peter took a step back from the camera in the asylum. It shouldn't be on, but the red light blinked slowly. It was watching him. He waved his hand in front of it. A flicker, a stutter. The feed glitched, and for a second, the screen on the wall came alive. A shadow moved, then, "Peter!" A voice distorted, male, familiar, then static. Peter's spider sense pulsed like a migraine. Not danger, but distortion. The loom had been watching more than just fate. It had been recording it. He found an old monitor buried in the debris, plugged it into the camera's line. The screen flickered. Footage rolled, fast, hours and hours compressed into minutes. Then suddenly the feed paused on a frame. Peter froze. It was him, sleeping, in his own apartment, from a corner of the ceiling. Someone had been watching through the loom, through the threads themselves, and now they knew he knew. Suddenly, the lights flickered. Somewhere, a door creaked. Then, written across the screen in jagged digital font, "You were never the only spider." Brooklyn Cemetery, 2:13 a.m. The grass was wet from the mist. Peter's boots crunched softly on the gravel as he walked between the tombstones. He didn't know why he was here. The loom had whispered a name into his dreams, a name he hadn't heard in years. Gwen. But Gwen Stacy was dead. That much had never changed, no matter the universe. Peter stopped in front of her grave. The old stone was cracked, weather-worn, but someone had placed a single, fresh white lily on top. Not Peter. He looked around. Wind rustled the trees. Nothing. Until he heard it. Footsteps, soft, measured. He turned, and there she was. A girl in a black hooded jacket, blonde hair tucked behind one ear. Her eyes looked up at him with a familiarity that cut through time. "Peter, you followed the threads, didn't you?" His heart stopped. "Gwen?" She nodded slowly. "Not your Gwen, but I remember your scream." Peter staggered back. This was impossible. "I died. I felt the snap in my neck. But the loom, it caught me." She reached into her coat, pulled out a jagged piece of fabric. It shimmered like it wasn't fully real. A thread that was never meant to break. Peter touched it, and for a second he saw flashes of other lives, other deaths, and a place, a room built of pure golden web, the loom. "They're using it again," Gwen whispered. "But this time, not just to control fate. They want to overwrite it." And then, her eyes darted to the shadows behind Peter. "We're not alone." Peter turned and saw a shape rise from behind a grave, cloaked, silent, watching, and the thread in Gwen's hand burned red. Beneath the city, silence ruled. Peter followed Gwen through the narrow brick tunnels under Manhattan. The deeper they went, the colder it became. Unnaturally cold, like the walls themselves had forgotten the warmth of the sun. Their footsteps echoed in rhythm, the sound bouncing off damp stone. This was built before the city, Gwen said softly, before maps, before names. The loom needed a place untouched by human time. They reached a sealed iron door. Symbols were etched into the metal, some spider-like, some that shimmered when Gwen brushed her fingers over them. She placed the thread fragment from earlier into a small slit at the center. A hiss, a glow. The door creaked open. "Welcome to the Room of Threads," Gwen whispered. Peter stepped in and gasped. The room was circular, vast and without walls. Instead, webs stretched endlessly, forming a dome above and below. The air shimmered, thick with golden strands that hummed with life. Every thread vibrated, each one tied to a life, a moment, a memory. "Every choice we make," Gwen said, "every breath, it's all here, recorded, guided, sometimes rewritten." Peter walked slowly, looking up. Some threads were fraying, others glowed red, and in the center hung a loom. Not a machine, but a being, the loom weaver. Its shape defied physics, part spider, part ghost, part memory. It spun threads with limbs that flickered in and out of view. "It's awake," Peter whispered. The loom weaver stopped and looked at him. A voice echoed in Peter's head, not heard, but felt. "Peter Parker, too many threads converge on you." Peter fell to his knees, overwhelmed by visions. Lives unlived, deaths delayed. Gwen falling again and again. "What do they want from me?" The loom weaver blinked, or maybe it rippled. "You are the knot, and knots must be untangled." Behind him, Gwen shouted, "They're coming!" A pulse shook the chamber. The threads shook violently. Portals began to open, black voids tearing across the dome. Through them, figures emerged, hunters, spider creatures from broken timelines, deformed, driven mad by failed rewrites. Now, they seek stability through destruction. "Run!" Peter ran, not through a hallway, not through a tunnel, but through threads. He and Gwen leapt from strand to strand, each one humming beneath their feet. Below them, the golden dome of the Room of Threads shattered, fragments of fate spinning away into nothingness. Behind them, chaos. The hunters roared, their deformed spider bodies ripping through the web, clawing and leaping across collapsing strands. Some had too many eyes, some had none. All screamed in fractured voices, echoes from lives that never should have been. Gwen looked over her shoulder. "Faster, Peter, the threads are collapsing." Peter's breath came in ragged gasps. His mind spun. Time didn't work here. Every step felt like a memory and a prophecy. "Where are we going?" "The anchor point," Gwen shouted. "Every web has one. A center, a root." Peter jumped across a wide gap and fell short. But just before he plummeted into the void, a thread caught him, glowing silver. He clung to it, and for a moment, the thread spoke. He saw a kitchen, Aunt May laughing, MJ brushing her hair, a child's voice calling him Dad. This was my future. Gwen pulled him up. "They don't want you to see it." Suddenly, the loom weaver's voice returned. "The knot resists, the knot remembers." Peter clutched his head. Images poured in, memories of other timelines, other Parkers, a version of him that never lost Uncle Ben, one who never became Spider-Man, one who became something darker, a black suit, a white spider emblem, and the loom split in two. Peter screamed, "No, enough!" A wave of power exploded from him, hurling the hunters back. Threads snapped, reality screamed, and then silence. Peter knelt on a dark thread, trembling. "What am I becoming?" Gwen placed a hand on his shoulder. "You're remembering who you are, Peter. That's what they're afraid of." The threads began to shift. As Gwen led Peter deeper through the loom pathway, the air itself felt heavier, thicker, like walking through time that had congealed. Before them, a vast emptiness. Then, as their feet stepped on a shimmering strand, something unfolded. A space shaped like a heart, glowing deep red and gold. Around them, threads that moved slowly, like breathing veins. "This is it," Gwen whispered. "The anchor point. The very first thread." Peter felt dizzy. His spider sense didn't tingle, it screamed, not in warning but in awe. "It's alive! It always has been." From the far side of the chamber, a figure stepped out of the mist. He wore no mask. Peter froze. It was him, but older, tired, covered in cuts that shimmered like thread tears, and his eyes full of knowledge, pain, and something else. "Surrender." "You made it," the figure said with a voice like Peter's own. "What is this? Who are you?" Peter whispered. "I'm the Peter who stopped fighting." The anchor Peter moved closer. "I was chosen to guard this place. Because I broke. Because I saw too much." Peter backed away. You're me?" "In one timeline. The one where I watched too many people die." The older Peter pointed at the web strands. "Each thread is someone you loved. Each cut is someone you lost." Peter looked around. The threads were fraying, fading. "They're dying? Being forgotten. Why?" "Because you've forgotten who you are." "I haven't." "Haven't you?" the older Peter said, eyes glowing. Then the threads began to scream, not metaphorically, literally. Voices, MJ, Aunt May, Ned, Uncle Ben, even Gwen, calling out in terror. Peter clutched his head. The weight of every timeline crashed in. Suddenly, Gwen grabbed his hand. "Peter, listen to me. The Loom Weaver has been severing threads, cutting versions of you out. If we don't stop it now, there won't be any of you left." Peter blinked, trembling. "Then tell me what to do." "Step into the anchor, reclaim it." Peter looked at the anchor point, pulsing like a living heart. If he stepped in, he might lose everything, or remember everything. "You'll forget this version of me," Gwen whispered, "but you'll save the others." Peter closed his eyes, then stepped forward. When Peter stepped into the anchor point, it felt like falling, but upward. He was no longer in the web or any physical space. He was within the thread of himself. He floated in a sea of silver strands, and each one pulsed with a memory. He saw himself swinging through New York for the first time, falling in love with MJ, failing Uncle Ben, losing Gwen, laughing with Ned, fighting alongside the Avengers, crying over May's grave, screaming at the sky when everything fell apart. The threads wrapped around him, each memory tethering him back together, rebuilding a version of himself he didn't know had shattered. "You are every Peter Parker," a voice echoed. "You are the sum of every grief, every hope, every fall, and every climb." Peter reached out, and each thread glowed brighter. But then, something else moved through the web, like ink spilling across silk, a shadow. It didn't walk, it slithered. Its body was long, thin, and made of torn timelines and shredded masks. "So, the child touches the source," it hissed.
The Loom Weaver stepped forward from the dark. Its face was made from dozens of Spider-Man masks, stitched, burned, cracked. Each eye lens blinked out of sync. "You came too late, the web is dying. I am the only weaver now." Peter floated, surrounded by threads of everyone he loved. "Why are you doing this?" "Because the web betrayed me. Because I was the first spider, and they erased me, cast me aside." "So you destroy every other version of me?" "Number I collect them. I am making the perfect spider from the broken pieces of all the rest." Peter's anger boiled, but the Loom Weaver struck first. The web screamed. Threads snapped. Realities twisted. Peter flew through collapsing memories, saw other Spider-Men fall. Some he'd never met. Some who wore armor. Some who were wolves. Some who had no face at all. "You can't kill us all." "No," Loom Weaver whispered, "but I only need to kill you." Suddenly, Gwen's voice cut through the void. "Peter, remember who you are." Peter clenched his fists. The threads began to obey him, surround him. "I'm not one Spider-Man," Peter growled. "I'm every Spider-Man who never gave up." He reached toward the loom itself. The web surged, and the battle began. The loom shuddered like a living thing. Peter stood at its center, his body wrapped in memory strands that pulsed like veins, each thread connected to a version of himself. Some alive, some long gone, all still fighting. The loom weaver towered above the web, his form now monstrous, limbs like spiders, wings made of broken timelines. A crown of twisted silk crowned his melting face. "You stand at the center of everything, boy," the loom weaver boomed. "And you're still alone." Peter stood taller, gripping the threads tighter. "Number, I'm not." One by one, they arrived. From ruptures in the loom, portals opened like holes torn in space. A Spiderman in medieval armor. A woman, spider with fire in her hair. A kid in a hoversuit. A six-armed mutant. A noir detective. A blind spider monk. A masked teen from the Bronx. A father and daughter in matching spider suits. Even Spider Pig. They came swinging, leaping, crawling, each holding onto their thread. Peter's eyes welled up. The multiverse didn't give up on him, because he never gave up on them. "We don't need a perfect spider," Peter shouted. "We need each other." The loom weaver screamed. The battle began. Reality unraveled. The loom turned into a war zone of light and silk and shadow. Spider-Men clashed with thread creatures, mutant versions of Peter, twisted by loom weaver's experiments. Some cried for help. Some couldn't be saved. Peter moved through the chaos like a conductor, sending strands to those in danger, binding wounds with memory, catching the falling, lifting the broken. The loom itself responded. Each act of courage rewove what was broken. "This is what it means to be Spider-Man," Peter whispered. "Not power, not glory, but to lift when others fall." But Loom Weaver grew desperate. He tore at the loom, trying to erase them all at once. The structure cracked. The source glowed dark red. Peter turned to Miles. "It's time. You with me?" "Always," Miles replied. Together, they leapt into the heart of the loom. A final thread in their hands. Everything narrowed to one moment. A choice. To destroy the loom, or to give it back to the multiverse. Peter looked at all the faces around him, friends, strangers, futures unlived, and made his choice. He wove the thread back into the loom, not to control it, but to free it. The loom exploded in light. The light faded. Silence returned. Peter opened his eyes slowly. He was lying on the loom's floor, now fractured and lifeless, no longer glowing, no longer humming with time. Around him, the other spiders stirred. Miles helped Gwen to her feet. Miguel stood, bruised but alive. Silk cradled a younger version of herself. Ben Riley wiped blood from his face. Even Spider Pig blinked in confusion. They'd won. But victory came with a cost. Some hadn't made it back. Some threads were gone, lost forever in the fight. Peter touched his chest. The thread he had once held onto the core of his own identity was no longer there. He still was, but different, lighter, quieter, like a song with its last note fading out. Miles approached. "You okay?" Peter nodded but said nothing. The loom was free. No one would control the destiny of the multiverse again. But what now? Suddenly, a final voice echoed. "Peter." It was the Oracle Spider, glowing in fragments of silk and fading stars. She floated above the loom like a dying constellation. "The loom is gone, but its memory lives on. In you. In all of you." Peter looked around at the others who had fought, who had chosen not to conquer, but to preserve. "This isn't the end," Oracle said. "But for you, Peter Parker, it can be peace." And with that, she vanished. Peter stood in the silence. For once, he didn't feel the need to swing away. For once, the thread didn't pull him forward. For once, he could choose to stop. Back on Earth 616, New York was waking up. Skyscrapers reflected dawn. Sirens sang low. Life moved on, unaware of how close it came to unraveling. Peter Parker stood atop a building, not in his suit. Just Peter. He watched the city breathe. Somewhere, another spider swung across. Maybe Miles. Maybe Gwen. Maybe someone new. He smiled. "Let the web grow," he whispered. Elsewhere, across dimensions. A universe where Mayday Parker saved her own father. A world where Gwen became the hero her world needed. A timeline where Uncle Ben lived, and Peter chose differently. A world where no spider existed, but one was about to be born. The web no longer controlled them. They wove themselves. Somewhere in the deep multiverse, a small glowing thread spun itself silently in the dark. It shimmered with potential. A child's laughter echoed nearby. Then a whisper. With great power, a hand young, uncertain reached out and touched the thread. Comes great possibility. And the web began again.